Happy Easter, everyone. Thank you. I just want to tell you about how I prepared today's message before we read this. On Friday, we had Good Friday service, so pastor had spoken, and I didn't speak. I wasn't prepared to speak, but when he was speaking, I came up with some ideas. So, in literature, sometimes we talk about texts in conversation. So when one person's writing a book, they're thinking of another book, and their story is talking to another story. So similarly, I came up with something when he was speaking, so this message is a response to that one. So this is the paper I wrote it on from Julia's sparkly notebook. So that's my story about how I started today's message. So now we could read something we heard on Friday. So let's look at Matthew 11, if someone could read 16 and 17. Okay. So this is Jesus describing a generation of people. So just to clarify, when we talk about a generation, it means everyone born in that certain time period. So you all would have similar ways of thinking about life, similar philosophies, similar religious beliefs. There's something that ties a group of people born around the same time together. So in America, we categorize different generations. For example, right after World War II, we call them the baby boomers. And then we have Generation X, we have the millennials. So there's different generations that are tied together by their expectations or their philosophies. So here you can see that the way he describes this group of people, which still resonates today, is basically how most of us live without really thinking too much about it, which is we expect one thing to follow the other. So if someone is playing a flute, for example, using this image, we expect there is a dance. If there's a flute, there's got to be some sort of dance. If there's music, there's dance. If there's a dirge, which is a song that is sung at funerals, we assume people are there to mourn. That is basically just a natural progression of things. Some things follow other things. We just assume that is the case, right? And it's not something that requires too much thinking. It's just like asking you what 2 + 2 is. You know it's 4. There's no real debate about it. We know what's supposed to happen. Certain events happen, then other events follow. So for example, maybe you go to high school, and then you go to college, and then you get a job. This is a progression of natural events. And whether it's mournful events or joyful events, we have certain expectations about what's supposed to happen. For example, we might have expectations about what we're supposed to do by a certain time period in our life. What we're supposed to do by the time we're 18, by the time we're 25, by the time we're 35, 45, right? So there's certain expectations we might have that follows the expectations of others, of course. So let's say you're around 60, 65, the expectation is you're going to retire from your job, right? So certain events we're expecting to progress naturally along those lines. Now, in the context of this story, we see Jesus is talking about this because John the Baptist didn't follow the expectation of what people expected him to do. And neither is Jesus doing so. And since that's the case, both people are getting a lot of resistance because we don't like things that break the natural order. There's a way we want our life to go. We have some sort of a blueprint. And if something disrupts our blueprint, we're not happy about that being the case, right? There's nothing positive we can find in that scenario. But today is Easter. So Easter is specifically about a disruption to the natural order of things. The idea of resurrection itself is a disruption of what we know to be true, that death is permanent. So at the very least, we'd have to think about this as a brand new person. The real person of who Jesus is born in this circumstance. So let's look at Matthew 26, and let's read verse 50 down a little bit. These are all very familiar selections, I think. Matthew 26, verse 50 down. Okay. So there's a lot more to the story. But at the basic level, what we're talking about that's happening to Jesus, especially between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, is there's some sort of a great emptying that's going on. For the real Jesus to resurrect, the old Jesus has to die. And the death is not simply a cutting off of his head. It's not a momentary thing and it's all over. It's a long, prolonged emptying that's happening here. So, for example, at the basic level we see here, one of his closest friends is betraying him. So that's Judas. He's betraying him into the hands of the people who will have him killed. So to resurrect this new person, Jesus' real person, and to cross over from death to life, where the old and the new are together there, something has to be emptied. So first of all, the nature of sacrifice. So he had to give up multiple things. In this scenario, he's giving up one of his friends. And there's a very painful parting, because it's not just like, let's say you break up with a spouse or someone that you love, but your friend is your closest companion. And here, when Judas comes here, you don't see a great outrage from Jesus, more like you see something that is like acceptance. Okay, this has to happen. I knew it was going to happen. So friend, do what you came here for. It doesn't imply that he's not affected by it. He's greatly affected by it. And I guess it's very important that you understand, to become this new person that we're all aiming for, it requires a lot of the emptying of the old person. That's really hard to do. It's hard to surrender to something that causes a great deal of pain. Change is painful. There's no way that you can change without undergoing some sort of a pain of discarding that old version of yourself. And this crossing over from death to life can be a very painful scenario. So if you remember on the cross, and I'm not taking every verse here to remind us of this, on the cross there's two other losses he has. One, he takes his mother and hands her over to one of his disciples, right? He is basically relinquishing this woman who gave birth to him to someone else to take care of. That's also a painful parting. His clothes were divided and taken by lot by the people who were crucifying him. So material goods, the people you love, your blood connections, all these are sacrifices he is making that he has to leave behind as part of his old self. And that's not a very easy thing to do. So, we can keep reading here to see, you can see in this story, it's not just the Jesus that walked for 3 years you see in the story. You see the old and the new together at the same time. So let's keep reading from 52 to 56. Matthew 26, 52 to 56. Okay, so you see that someone has tried to defend Jesus with a sword, and Jesus is rejecting that form. Basically, what Peter was trying to do by cutting off the ear of this servant is prevent this from happening to Jesus. Prevent him from being arrested. Prevent him from being killed on the cross. Prevent that from occurring. And most of the time, our natural reaction to painful events is to stop the event, avoid the event. But as we must have noticed by now in our life, some things are beyond our ability to stop. They are beyond our ability to prevent. And they occur no matter what. So here's Peter trying to stop this event, and Jesus pointing out, don't you think I couldn't call upon my Father? And he would have once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels. Now that's the Jesus that's going to resurrect soon. The Jesus that lived for 33 years on the ground, on the earth. He never called legions of angels. He could have, but he never did. That's going to be the resurrected Jesus. But he's not going to do that now. Now is not the time for that. Now, when he wants to avoid his death and pain and suffering, is not when he's going to call the angels to prevent any of this from occurring. And, at the very basic level, this is when we get upset with God, that he doesn't help us avoid the problem, prevent the problem. He has 12 legions of angels at his disposal. It's possible he could prevent this from occurring at all. It's possible he could have stopped these things from happening to us at all, but he didn't. And you can see that that version of Jesus is very much real right here, because Jesus is speaking about it as a reality. But as human beings, the only reality we believe in is the one we see. And the one we see here, the one his disciples see there, is a man who taught and healed many, many people who is now about to be sentenced to death. And that reality is hard to ignore. So all the time we see there's two different versions of reality that are at war in our life. One version is the one we read in Matthew 11. Well, I played the flute for you, so of course you're going to dance, right? I played you the sad song, so of course you're going to mourn. The natural progression of events here is that Jesus will die and never come back. Everything will be finished. It's not just a death that's a person just died. A whole ministry, a whole healing service, a whole change in the way that Israel is supposed to be run, all of that would die at once. That's what we know to be true, based on everything we see here. You see that Jesus lost his mother, he lost even his own clothing, and his best friend, and right after this we see all his disciples fled. Now they're not just running because they're afraid that certainly they will die with Jesus. They're also running because Jesus just said, I'm going to go through it. I'm not going to stop this from happening. I'm going to go through it. And the reason that we avoid serving this God, or reading our Bible, or praying when we're supposed to pray, is because we know that God's answer is not, oh, I'll stop it. I'll stop the pain. His answer is rather, you have to go through this. There's something at the end of it. The real version of you is still coming, but you have to go through this to get to that version. And we don't like that answer, so we run. We run far away, because who likes to sign up for pain, right? Literally nobody. Let's read verse 59 down a little bit in the same chapter. Again, you're seeing two different realities. So they have arrested Jesus. They have all this false testimony to bring against him. They have some of his true words that he said to bring against him. But to all of this, Jesus says nothing. He doesn't respond at all. And here is the high priest asking him, well, aren't you going to answer? This is a case built up against you. Don't you have something to say? It says, but Jesus remained silent. You know, there are times in our life where we don't hear God speaking at all. It's not because he's dead. That hasn't happened yet. It's not because he has nothing to say. That also is not the case. It's that the present situation we're focused on, the expectations of our situation here, which is that Jesus should defend himself, maybe he be declared innocent, and he be allowed to go free, right? Perhaps that could happen if we follow how a court is supposed to work. Perhaps if Jesus spoke up for himself. Perhaps if he had witnesses for his side, he could still be set free. There are expectations. We are a generation of these expectations. But we're looking for the real McCoy here, the real Jesus. And they're all very focused on the human Jesus that said this, that did that, and what is he up to, and what's his purpose here. And finally, the high priest is asking him to testify under oath, tell us if you're the Christ, the Son of God. And so Jesus says, yes, it is as you say. But I say to all of you, in the future, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. In the future. He's over here fighting for his life in the present. What he's supposed to do is defend himself. What he's supposed to do is try to get out of the situation. Everything the people are bringing up here is to challenge who he is right this minute. But Jesus is focused on his real self. He's focused on who he will be when he resurrects. What's going to happen one day? He's going to come at the right side of God. And you know, these two forms of reality start to conflict. They clash with the way we see things. So you could recite Psalm 110 to yourself. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. But that implies a long process. There's a change of reality. It's not going to go the way you think this is going to go. The way they think this is going to go is that he will die and that will be the end of Jesus. Now, Jesus is talking about the future. Yeah, I'm that person right now, but you're not going to see that. But one day in the future, you'll see me again, and at that point, I'll be sitting at the right hand of God, right? That's the real version of me that you're not able to see right now. Of course, their response to it is fairly predictable. He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now we have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? He is worthy of death, they answered. And this clash is a dangerous clash. Because God is telling you that you are worth something, that you are going to be successful, that you have a future where things are different than the way they look right now. And your day-to-day life is telling you, no, that's not true. You're going to fail. You have to do something. You have to change something, or you'll be bankrupt, or this will happen, or that will happen. These are two different forms of reality. And God knows how this is going to go. But we're not focused on what God knows. We're focused on what's surrounding us right now. And like the priest that you see here in the story, to even think that you have more hope than what you have right now is blasphemy worthy of death. That you would think that you are more than this person in chains right now. That's not even possible. That's not the real version of anything. When my kids were young, I used to read them the story. It was called The Velveteen Rabbit. It's a kid's book, right? And the gist of the story is there's this boy who gets this stuffed rabbit, and that's his toy. And the rabbit is very loved by the boy, and then later he ends up sort of abandoning the rabbit because he grows up. He gets sick, the rabbit gets covered in germs, and they decide they're going to destroy this rabbit. But the beginning of the story, when the rabbit is in the toy collection, there's another toy there that tells him, you could become a real rabbit. Not just a toy rabbit, a real rabbit, right? And then he's like, well, how does that happen? How do I become a real rabbit? So the other horse tells him, well, the real isn't how you're made, it's the thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a really long, long, long time, and not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. So then the rabbit asks, well, does it hurt? Sometimes, the horse said, when you don't mind being hurt. So how does it happen? Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, or bit by bit? So, well, it doesn't happen all at once. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you're real, you can't be ugly except to people who don't understand. So the toy is telling this rabbit that once someone loves you enough, and you fall apart because they've been carrying you everywhere, then you become real to that person. And this can't happen to people that have sharp edges, that are delicate, that will easily break. Because there's a long process that you're with this person, right? Now, I'm going to adapt that to the story and explain that really the real version of who we are, our metamorphosis, hasn't happened yet, but it's a long process. There's an emptying of some part of who we are that has to happen. We're trying very hard to get the benefits of the new and keep the old. Stay the way we are, but we want what God gives us too, right? And we do that not because we don't want to change, but because we're afraid of pain. We're afraid of things being lost in our life. We're afraid of these exact scenarios happening to us, where we have to lose our mother and our closest friends, and we have to lose our connections to people and be betrayed to the point of suffering. We don't want any of these things, but if you look at this story, you can see repeatedly what was happening during Jesus' suffering and death is that people are unable to see the real Jesus. They can only see the Jesus of the circumstance right now. And the circumstance right now, he's a human being. He's been beaten up and suffering. He is in chains. He's going to be tortured. He's going to be put on a cross, and he's going to die. That's the circumstance that defines for them who this Jesus is. And most of the time, if we look at our circumstances, we say, well, I need a loan of $30,000. Jesus is not someone who's going to give me a loan. So he's not real. I need to have 3 kids. Jesus is not someone that gives you children. So he's not real. The circumstance is suffering, so we think that means Jesus can't be real here. The real Jesus hasn't yet stood up. So who is this Jesus? Because many times he is quiet. Many times he doesn't respond. And when he does speak to you, he's always speaking in the language of the future. This is who you will be. This is who you will become. And sometimes he even says, like, it's happening right now. You are this person. You are successful. You are a blessing. He says it in the present tense. And you think, well, this must be some kind of a joke. Because look at me right now. God's telling me I'm going to be blessed. The next day I lost my job. What? That doesn't make any kind of sense. Because again, we expect certain things to follow other things. So if I'm going to be a success, today I should get $10 million. Tomorrow I should have 5 houses. The day after that I should have 50 friends, right? The natural progression of events, there's a progression. Something would follow something else. That's how life works. So if I'm on trial to be crucified, if I want to be successful here, I should be declared innocent and set free. I should not willingly go to my death. I should not willingly empty my pockets. I should not willingly just suffer because suffering is handed over to me. That shouldn't be the way it goes. That's how we think. But you see, Jesus is not thinking this way at all. But he's not somebody who is delicate, who has sharp edges, who you just put on the shelf. You know, when we are those kinds of people, it's hard for us to change into who we really are. Everything that happens to us, we break. And I don't mean that we're delicate. What I mean by that is we get resentful and angry and irritated. We close our Bibles. We don't pray. We change completely in the problem to become an angry version of ourselves. So instead of becoming the real version, we become some sort of poisoned version. And that's our reaction to the pain in our life. We're not willing to let the process take over and do its work. We are threatened by the words of the people that are telling us you are worthy of death. You are worthy of death. Only failure is meant for you. These are not things that are going to work out for you. And the words of people convince us more than the words of God that tells us, oh, you're valuable. You're important. You're going to change the world. Those things don't seem to have reality to us because someone played a flute, we think we should dance. But that's not the way God works. The whole story of Easter is a story of disrupting the way things normally happen. And the way God works is also a disruption in the way things normally happen. He's not a Jesus that is assigned to circumstance. He's way beyond that. He's not even dead yet, and he's already talking about when he's going to come back on the right side of God. That's another version of Jesus, the one they can't even think about right now. They can only consider, well, this is a Jesus that deserves to die. Let's look at Matthew 27, verse 36 down a little bit. There you go. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God. And this is pretty much what we have ingrained in our minds as if it is what Jesus told us. Since he's the Son of God, he should rescue us from this if he wants us. This is how we think. But I'm just going to point out to you, is the chief priests and the teachers of the law who wanted to kill Jesus who said those words, right? And here's Jesus crucified. He's got the sign above him that declares him in a mocking way the King of the Jews. Because after all, he is crucified like a common criminal. He's given a crown, but it's a crown of thorns. He's beaten up and they ask him to prophesy. Well, who hit you? You can prophesy. You tell us who did this. He's given this robe to wear while they make him suffer. There's a false kingship that they're giving him, which is basically just suffering and thorns. But there's a reality to this too, you know? We're so eager to get things from the world. We're so eager to get our crown, to get our robe. We think we are deserving of these things. After all, we are Christians and we do things the right way and we work really hard. And if you don't think like that, I think like that. The first time someone does something wrong to me, I will immediately think, I don't deserve this. Now, whether I deserve it or not is completely up to debate. But in my mind, it is not. I deserve good things, not bad things. And when bad things happen to me, I would like to avoid them from happening to me. And there's a dying of the old self. Maybe once you wanted this crown. Now that you got this crown, you see, well, this is just thorns. Why did I want it all this time? Maybe once you wanted this robe. Now that you get it and the suffering that goes with it, you think, well, I thought this was good, but turns out it's not. Maybe once you wanted things others have, and houses, and cars, and the friends they have, and the possessions they have. But once you get it, you see there's some sort of unreality about this. This isn't who you are meant to be. This isn't enough for you. For other people, maybe it is enough. There are plenty of kings at the time of Jesus, and they're all happy with their robes that are purple. But this isn't for Jesus. That's why they take it off and they crucify him without any of those trappings. He does have the sign that calls him the King of the Jews. He is indeed the King of the Jews. He might be suffering, dying like a criminal. He might have nothing on him that indicates that he is a king, but he is still nonetheless a king. That's the reality of who he is. And that reality cannot be taken from him. They could kill him, literally kill him, and not take away his kingship, and not take away his authority. At the best that Satan can do to you, which he can certainly do a lot, he is still a chained animal that can only reach as far as the end of his chain. You ever see a dog that's chained up in a yard that's exceptionally vicious? When you walk by, even on the street, it starts barking and lunging at the gate. Now, it's frightening, at least to me, who's afraid of dogs. So when you see it, you might immediately panic and back up and think about all the things that could go wrong. But eventually you'll see, because the dog can only come till the end of its chain. Then it's stuck. It's not able to go past that chain, right? And you will see that despite all his barking, he can't really hurt you. He can't really change who you are. He can't really determine what your life should be, because all the damage that the devil does is only to convince you should be afraid of suffering. You should try to avoid it. You should try to go the other way. Don't even come down this road. Go a different road where you don't have to worry about having your pockets empty, having friends that betray you, having a mother you have to give away, where your own clothes have to be given away to someone and you have to lie in a borrowed grave. Go a different road. You have many options. Don't pick this option. That's the devil's plan. He's giving you all these false sort of echoes of suffering just to tell you, if you come this road, it's going to get bad. You don't want this death. Go a different route. But here's Jesus telling you, you got to go this way. There's an emptying you have to do of the old self to get to the real self. And it's kind of painful and scary, but there's a real thing waiting for you at the end of all that. And you see all these people that come and see Jesus on the cross, their reaction is, well, you're going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days. Save yourself. Come down from the cross. You mean make sure he doesn't die? Take him off the cross so he doesn't die? Now, the people that are right there, they could do that. They put him up there. They could take him down if they want, but they won't. They put him in this scenario. They nailed him to the cross, right? Well, there is no movement. You will die on this cross. You will slowly bleed to death. Your lungs are going to fill up with the blood. You won't be able to raise your body to take a breath. You will suffocate to death. It is slow and it is painful. And still they tell you, well, why don't you get yourself out of this? Now, this is how you know that it's the devil. Because suffering happens, and Jesus tells you, you can master this. And the devil tells you, you can get out of this. Just escape. You can get right off the cross. There's two different answers, right? The expected answer, the one that follows when you say 2 + 2 = 4, when you say I play the flute and therefore you should dance, is, well, you're suffering, then get out. If your hand is in the fire, take it out of the fire. Why did you put yourself in this position? Leave. Get off the cross. Avoid the problem. You don't need to go through this. But that's not what Jesus is saying. And if he could get off the cross, as he's already said many times that he could, he doesn't attempt to do so at all. He doesn't try to get off the cross at all. He doesn't avoid the fact that there is death and suffering for him at all. He decides to go right through it. Now, if you look verse 45 to 46, it says, from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Remember, emptying of the old self. Your friends are gone. Your mother is gone. Your clothing is gone. Your authority in this world has been taken from you. And now it seems that your God is gone. That he's not responding. He's not taking you down from this cross. He's not telling you, you've suffered enough. You know, you can get off of this cross. You can come down now. This should be enough. And this Jesus' death and suffering, and maybe the worst part of his suffering is this abandonment he feels. You notice how dark it is. That in the middle of the afternoon, which is when Jesus dies, it is dark, like it is night. And you know, when you go through the darkest parts of your life, it certainly can seem like there is no end to the suffering. It can certainly seem like God is not willing to take you out of the scenario. Now, God's talking about a future, but you can't escape your present. You're stuck here. And it's very hard for you to think of anything beyond this right now because you're thinking this is the natural progression of things. This is the real me. The one that's suffering on the cross, that's the real me. Now think for yourself if Jesus had thought that. How untrue that would be. Would Jesus, the real Jesus, be the man that is broken and beaten and nailed to a cross like a common thief? Imagine that he believed this is the real him. Think what a lie that is. Think what the lie that real Jesus is, because we know the real Jesus who resurrected the dead, who came back from the dead himself with no assistance, the one who walked on the water, the one who comes at the right hand of his Father, the one who John describes in Revelation like a person he has never seen before. That's the real Jesus. But imagine for a minute that you are on that cross and you believe that the situation you're in right now, that's the real you. I'm always meant to be like this. I'm always meant to fail. I'm always meant to be this person who never gets my way. I'm always meant to lose. I'm always meant to be broke. Now, I'm sure you have said this to yourself. Or rather, that someone has said it to you and you believed it. If you are the Son of God. If. But the trick is, you can't believe that to be true. You can't believe that this is the version of you that is real. This is only the emptying of the old self. And emptying is painful. Emptying is not a pleasant experience, but you can't stop short. You can't get up to graduation and say, I'm going to quit school right now. You did all this work, and now, because things got really hard and your mind convinced you, you can't get it. You can't make it. Just stop right here. Because of that, we don't finish the emptying. We fall prey to the darkness that tells us there is no one here for you. Even God has abandoned you, right? And you know, when you see that Jesus dies, it says that he gave up in a loud voice and he gave up his spirit. And then it says that all these cataclysmic things happened, right? The earth shook, and the tombs were broken, and people came out of them, and the curtain in the holy place was torn in half. Then you see people have a different opinion. Let's read 54 down a little bit. Okay, what? He died. They all saw him die. And dying is probably the most human thing you can do. Once someone dies, you go, yep, that person was a human being. Because once they were alive and now they're no longer alive, right? That's what death means. And Jesus died. But when he died, all of a sudden the centurion, the people that nailed him, and all the other people that are there, oh, this was the Son of God. 2 minutes ago, you told him, if you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. But he didn't come down from the cross. He went through it all the way to the end and died on that cross. Now that he is only a dead body, they say, oh, this was the Son of God. So see, you're not proving you're a Christian just by resurrection. You have to prove it by going through the death, by going through the emptying that happens. Because only a Christian can still keep standing at the end of that. Everybody else will fail. They will. It doesn't matter how strong their character is, it doesn't matter how strong their will is, they will break because they are sharp and they are delicate. They don't have the love of God to keep them going. They don't have the promise of God who sees who you really are. They don't have anything. They only have abandonment. And in that moment, almost everybody will fail to reach the end. But Jesus went through it, and because he went through it, not because he resurrected, it didn't happen yet. Here are all the people who watched him die saying, oh, this is the Son of God. This is the real Son of God. Because of what has happened, this is the real Son of God. Now, the things are a little different when he comes back to life, of course. Let's look at Luke 24. Let's read 36 to 40. Luke 24, 36 down a little bit. So when Jesus appears after death, after he resurrected, they are afraid of what they're looking at. This is a ghost. He's already dead. He can't be alive, right? Now this Jesus is not simply the Jesus that came down from heaven. This Jesus is the one that died on the cross, because he says to them, well, look, I have flesh and bones. He eats fish at one point. He shows them his hands and his feet. Where they put nails into his hands, he shows them these scars. Now again, ask yourself why we're so eager to escape our punishment, our suffering, and our difficulties. We want to avoid the nails in our hands, right? We want to avoid the nails in our legs. We want to avoid being a symbol of great humiliation. We want to avoid all those things. Jesus went through all those things. He emptied himself completely. You know, something that people in my family do, I can't say any names because I don't know who it is. Everyone denies doing this, is when we have a container of juice in the fridge, they'll drink from it. Then they will leave like this much, right? This much. So next time you go, I want some juice, you open it and you look at it, you just get mad. Because this is not even a full cup. There's a little bit left. And whoever left it, again, not saying any names, I think they know who they are the ones who said, I'm not going to take the last sip, because then it'll be my fault that this is finished. I'm going to leave this much there, which is not enough for anybody, but I'm going to leave this much there for the next person that comes along. Then that person will be the one that finished the juice, right? We're always leaving something. We give God stuff, but we always keep stuff to ourselves. And we say, okay, God, you could have this, but this other thing is too much for me. You know, I can't do this. I'm not able to do it. You're asking too much. That emptying, we don't do. We're afraid of what that could be, right? The crossing over from death into life. But you see, when Jesus came back to life, to convince his disciples that he was that he said he was. He doesn't do miracles. He shows them his hands and feet. He shows them the scars of the old life that he was living, the sacrifice that he had to give, right? So remember, he was giving. He suffered, and there are the marks to prove the suffering. Now he got a new self. He gave, and he's getting. He got a new self. He left some things behind. He had to leave his friends. He had to leave his mother. He had to leave the work that he had started behind. Now, he's a new person. The real Jesus is here now in all his glory. But the real Jesus is still part the old Jesus, you know? He still has friends. He still has scars. He has the scars to prove he's the old Jesus. You know, when you succeed at something, I'm sure you feel real proud that you succeeded. Of course, God got you there. And you're so proud. Everything went well. And eventually you convince yourself, oh, you know, I did so much work. That's why this happened for me. The scars are to remind you that's not how this went. You forgot. That's not how any of this went. You went through something. You went through a kind of death to get here, to become the real version of you. These scars are reminders to connect you to all those other people you're supposed to save. Oh, look, I'm still myself. Remember, this is who I was. This is what happened to me. And of course, the best version of the story we know. Let's read John chapter 20. Let's read 24 down a little bit. Everyone knows the story. Okay. Now, what Thomas just described is the body of the dead Jesus. And if you remember, when Jesus' body was taken down, there was only one person there. That was Joseph of Arimathea. He is not one of the disciples. We never see him in the story again. He's the only one who saw the body of Jesus as a dead Jesus, wrapped it up, put it in his tomb. Just him. The women were going to bring some herbs and such to anoint the body of Jesus, but they didn't see the dead body of Jesus either. Nobody else saw the dead body of Jesus. They all ran away. But here, the disciples saw the resurrected Jesus. He showed them his hands and his feet. He showed them his scars. I'm the old Jesus made new. But Thomas didn't see it. And since he didn't see it, he went back to the last time that he had seen Jesus. The only Jesus that's real to him is the dead Jesus, the dying Jesus. So he says, okay, you're saying you saw him, but unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger where the nails were, put my hand on his side, I won't believe that. You know, we are like Thomas, not because we doubt. Because you might think, oh, he doubts that Jesus resurrected. No, let's go way past that. He doesn't doubt he resurrected. He's doubting that there's anything after death at all. It's not simply Jesus he's questioning. He's questioning the memory of these people or their understanding of reality. No, there's nothing after that moment on the cross. Once you get on that cross, there is nothing else for you. That's it. And so I want to see this is the real Jesus. Let me see the wounds that I know they put on him when he was on that cross. Let me see that. Because once I see that, I will know this Jesus is not alive. He can't be. Because that was the end. You know, you might think, oh, I don't really have the faith, to understand how resurrection happens. But the reason for that is you're still stuck at the moment of death. You're still stuck in thinking that if I die in this scenario, and I don't mean literally, if I fail at this, if my bank account is emptied, if I keep going down this road and I lose everything, I've lost so much already, then surely this is the end. There is no coming back. So what Thomas is saying is, there is no resurrected Jesus. There's only the dead Jesus. But none of them saw the dead Jesus. They didn't even have the guts to stay long enough to see that happen. They ran away before that happened. Before he died. Think about it. We are all at the very moment of death. And because of that, just saying those words is petrifying. Because you're at the moment of death, you run the other way. Because after all, we're all about preserving ourselves. I don't want to die. I don't want to be bankrupt. I don't want my kids to be poor. I don't want to lose all this. I don't want all this to happen. I got to go. I know it's about to happen. I got to go. Never mind that you're next to the finish line. The finish line is asking for too much. So Thomas says, well, this can't be Jesus. It says a week later, disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them, and the doors were locked. Jesus came and stood among them, though the doors were locked. It doesn't matter that they already had erected these barriers against Jesus. Remember, I was saying last week that God works like a steamroller, right? Like a bulldozer. If it is time for God to show up, He's going to show up, and it doesn't matter who wants to stand in His way. He's going to just mow you right down. He's going to get where He needs to go. What He needs to do, He's going to do. Once this real version of ourselves kicks in, then the things that God has told you about, they're going to happen whether people want them to happen or not. Because they're expecting, there's a flute, there's a dance, there's a sad song, there's a mourning. There's things that are supposed to occur, but that's not really the way God's doing any of this. He's disrupting that system completely. He showed up even though the doors were locked against Him coming in. And now He's here, He says to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. And stop doubting and believe. Believe what? Not just believe that Jesus came back to life. Just seeing Jesus should tell you that. But believing that there is something after death. That there is something after this moment. After this suffering, there is a next step. There's something that comes after that. Normally there would not be. Normally, this would be it. That if you're bankrupt, you're bankrupt. That if you have no friends, you have no friends. No one's going to save you. The enemy has told you this every day. He's told you this in very practical terms. Listen, 2 + 2 is 4. Why are you trying to fight this? It's just the way things go. Why do you think anything should be different for you? It's different because you did this in obedience to what God told you to do. You didn't nail yourself to that cross. You didn't take this upon yourself that you wanted this. Someone asked you to do it. God asked you to do it. He asked you to carry this cross. You would never have picked this road. It's a long and painful road. But something has happened on that road. Something about you has changed on this road. And now you're getting to the point that things are getting real rough. They're getting very dicey. And it's a very painful, death-like experience. But when the resurrection happens, the best of the old and the new are there. You don't become a person that has no connection with the old. You're the old and the new together. And now He's telling Thomas, well, look, you can believe there is something after death. There is something after that. And then He says, because you've seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Most of the time when people talk about this verse, they say, Christians that believe in Jesus but have never met Him like His disciples have met Him, right? But I'm telling you, it means something else. Before you see the real version of your life, the real McCoy, if you can believe now, before death, that there's a resurrection for you. If you can believe that now. Those are the blessed people. Those who can believe that the resurrection is coming for them. Those who can believe that the real version of their life is coming for them. Those are the blessed people. Not the ones who wait till it happens and say, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Oh yeah, I knew God was going to give me things. Now that God has given me these blessings He promised me, now I can pray. Now I can read the Bible. Now I can tell people about God. I too have fallen prey to this sentiment because there are times I think, that person really should come to church or something. And then the same moment I would say to myself, yeah, but should I tell them that now? Look at my problems. Look at my situation. They're going to look at my life and think, you sure that you know the way to do this? Because in your life, things don't look like they're going so well. Are you the one to tell me that I should take the same road you're taking? Really? Because it doesn't look like it's going well for you. And so we're reluctant to talk about this, right? After all, it's been nothing but difficulty and suffering. But again, this way of thinking implies the end of the road is on the cross. I'm going to die. Everything I'm going to have is going to fail. And that's it. My story's over. When they crucified Jesus, they crucified hundreds of people at the same time. That's how crucifixion happened. They didn't just crucify one person or even 3 people. You know, the usual story is there's 2 thieves, right? And there's Jesus. No, it's called the hill of death. They crucify hundreds of people because they leave their crosses up there for people to see. Hundreds of people died that day, but only one person came back from the grave. Just because everybody has suffering doesn't imply that they know about their resurrection, because many of them have no hope beyond the suffering that they're in right now. That's why they give up. That's why they say, I'm not doing this. This is too much for me to bear. I'm quitting right now. You're quitting at what? The finish line? You're quitting why? Because nobody's with you? Jesus emptied every single thing in his life. He didn't just empty his blood in his body. He emptied his family connection by giving away his mother. He emptied his material connection, where even the clothes he was wearing, people cast lots for and took away from him. His friends that he was with for 3 years, they ran away. Even when Judas came to betray him, which should be the ultimate pain, he just said, to do what you have to do. Anyway, this is going to happen. It doesn't mean he's not suffering. And then ultimate pain, that while you are dying and everything is the darkest has been in your life, that you say, well, God, you left me too? You also turned your face? You also looked away from me? This is real painful, but this is not the end. You could say, oh, this is it. Past this, there's no coming back. Of course there's no coming back. Jesus is not coming back to life to go live in Galilee again. He's not coming back to be the son of Mary and Joseph again. He's not coming back to make tools and benches and cut stone again. He's coming back as God. Amen. It's not the same thing. Hallelujah. And in fact, if you're thinking, I want God to make all this go away, I want to go back to my life, I have news for you. You cannot go back to that life. The life you once lived is not your life. It's a borrowed life. You lived it to do the work you had to do. Now there's a cross, and it's suffering. You are not meant to go back to the old version of yourself. There's a real McCoy. There's a real version of who you are. And it's easy enough that everyone around you will say, you're a fool. You know what's going to happen, right? You know you're going to be bankrupt, right? You know your kids have no future, right? You know how this works. Look at the world. 2 + 2 is 4. If I play a flute, you're supposed to dance. That's how this goes. That's not what your life is. If you are a Christian, God already marked you. And you might try to leave his mark and go back to the life everybody else is living. Go ahead, try it. I dare you, try it. Because he won't let you. He won't let you do it. He won't let you be ordinary. He won't let you live the life other people are living, you know? It's kind of like a tattoo. It goes deep into your skin. You can't just wash this off. It's been imprinted to the point that it identifies who you are. And because it does, he's not satisfied with you being like everyone else, who's living and breathing and dying without understanding there is more for them past that. Now, you have been given this life, and perhaps you have suffered. Perhaps, like the story of the Velveteen Rabbit, someone has loved you and all your pieces have fallen off. And who you're supposed to be, the real version, that's only going to come after a long process of this moment. But don't give up. Don't give up, because it got real difficult, right? It got real difficult. But you have to go through that and empty everything to get to the real version of who you are. The real version is still going to have scars. It's still going to remember the suffering. It's still going to remember the things that happened to you. I certainly hope you remember those things. Those things made you who you are. God made you this way by taking you through those points. It might be tough, but you can make it. He put you here knowing you can make it. He knows you can do what other people cannot do. because the real version of you is still waiting out there. Remember, if you're thinking only Jesus did that the disciples were complete failures until Jesus went back to heaven. He lived, he died, he resurrected and went back without yet seeing who they could be. But while he was alive, he told Peter, hey, you're going to be the rock on which I build my church. Think what God tells you. And what great inspiration this is, because you're seeing something that doesn't even exist right now. It's not even real right now. And it takes a great deal of faith or foolishness to believe something that isn't even there yet. But the disciples were human beings, right? And they were failures, right? They ran away from their problems, right? They failed in so many ways, but when Jesus went back up there, they became who they were meant to be. They became those people. We have that transformation to undergo. We can't give up now because the real version of us is still waiting somewhere for us. May God bless you with these words.